Hi, everybody. It's John Newman, General Manager at Tab Products. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be presenting to you today. One of the areas of expertise that we have as an organization is looking at how to help people go more digital. The right pieces of a successful digitization project is really something that we've been doing for a couple decades now or more. And in the last year, we'll take a look at what the last 12 months has really represented. It's been a lot of change, and a lot of organizations are looking for ways to accelerate their digital transformation process. First off is one of the things that we've heard a lot of is digital transformation. It's a very commonly searched term. And remote and flexible working is something that we've all experienced and kind of been forced into since the first part of last year, which has now spurred a look at real estate strategies. And these are things that are top of mind for businesses, for governance professionals, for real estate, et cetera, really of all companies of all sizes. These things will also remain very important in the future as well. So looking at ways of people are transitioning quickly, making sure that they're doing it properly is going to be important in their long-term strategy. And important, in addition to that, is the importance of data. Historically, when we talk about digitization projects and going electronic, there was interest in really just transitioning paper to an electronic images. But now, in order to run a business, make the right business decisions, it's not just finding the file or the document quickly, but it's finding the data within the document to help make that decision. And then lastly is, we've seen this over the last decade or more, is shifting to cloud or SaaS technology, really reducing the internal dependencies on both staff, infrastructure, and then ease of the long-term use of that software, the technology with that vendor. So let's take a look at the three buckets of a successful project. A lot of times people look at the end, but don't put the right planning steps in to make sure that the entire process is successful, looking at it from a bigger picture view, and really outlining the business case and the value behind going digital with ongoing processes, and of course, all the legacy records that are out there. We've seen a lot of projects that have started out with a good idea of scanning, but then didn't necessarily account for a lot of the important factors like corporate structure, value of the documents, the access requirements of documents, and what also is very important is how those documents will actually be used and accessed once they have been digitized. So in today's world, many organizations are still in this hybrid mode, even especially with what happened to us all in 2020. So business lines are looking for how can they get access to critical records and documents in the future. Real estate, again, is trying to find ways to reduce the dependency on space, reduce footprints of traditional file rooms. IG legal and compliance wants to make sure that the records align with policies and procedures and retention guidelines, and there's not duplicate records that are floating around. We want to have that consistency of a singular certified copy or original. And of course, IT is what is their alignment with their IT practices? Is it cloud? Is it on-premise? What are those dependencies on not taking up and exploding within the space of what's being stored? So taking a look at the first bucket, strategic planning. Within this phase, it's really important to look at the corporate structure again and segment out what the needs of each business are and will be. There's typically different requirements for different departments within an organization. What I mean by that is HR, AR, if you're in banking, maybe loan operations, if you're in energy, land files, corporate archives, whatever it may be, there's different requirements based on different departments. Not everything is a singular cookie cutter approach. So aside from understanding the records, also looking at the overall business process and any specific workflows that might be required. These next two items really come together. what is a record? I mean, this is going back to basic records management for decades now, but it's important to take a step back and talk about what are actually records. It's easy to take an entire collection of records or boxes and digitize these, but it also brings potentials, again, for having multiple copies or a multitude of what's considered an original, having different versions in different repositories. So what is actually the right record? Shared drives, legacy technology, even physical records, marrying that together to make sure you have a singular record digitally. Many of these clients that we work with, they reference or suggest that over 70% of materials are not records, but a lot of times those records are part of a digitizing project, and we want to take those out of the process. So again, you're not clogging up your digital repository. Next is records retention and disposition, along with the access requirements, looking at what is a current year record, what is an active year record, inactive, retention versus lifetime record. So we have heard plenty of times that an organization wants to digitize everything, but upon further investigation, it really comes down to a smaller subset of what that initial collection is that truly needs to be digital. Once it is digital, again, also applying the right metadata and tags to ensure that the proper retention can be applied to that digital image. So again, it's not just a growing collection of records. And one of the most critical success factors in going digital comes down to user acceptance or user adoption of the system that they're putting into. So we want to make sure that the digital storage and retrieval system is easy to use, it's easier to search to make that project successful. So again, the adoption is quick, and the success of that really comes down to increased time in finding information, minimizing lost productivity, not having an unreliable decision-making process. So again, you can increase the efficiency and reduce the exposure of potential risk of not finding that record. Another main goal of the digital records is to ensure that the records and documents are available and reliable, not just in the next few days or the next few weeks or the next few months, but literally decades and sometimes centuries down the line. So choosing a technology, a solution that you're going to put them into that does have that long-term preservation opportunities versus just putting them into a shared drive or something that doesn't necessarily have that. So now we're going to get into the fun part, which is the actual project and digitizing. And we've come up with 9 steps to have a very successful project. These are, again, things that we've been doing for decades, and they've helped us to work with our clients or helped our clients to build a solid foundation for their project. So once that initial strategic planning is done, this also gets down into the department level, if you will, where we start doing that level of planning. So mapping out, what is a successful project for them? What are their business goals at the department level? Looking at what are the level of scanning requirements? What kind of discrete data do you want to extract from documents? And then what happens to the documents once you're done with the project? And how are you going to do the ongoing scanning? So next gets into resourcing. Of course, we as an organization have done a lot of these projects, but we've also helped other organizations to do them themselves. So selecting what is the right recipe for that project. Is it to do it in-house? Is it to work with a third-party vendor? Are there space requirements? Is there hardware things that you don't necessarily have as an organization that you want to leverage the expertise of the vendor, that they have the right scanning software, the right capture software, and maybe the right ongoing services as well, and the right technology to put that information into. So we all get excited because we want to get the project started, but what is next important is working in a pilot program or testing. Testing is really honing in that process to make sure that the collection, the way we're scanning it, the way we're capturing it, maybe in even the DPI in which you're capturing that information and the indexing, floats into the right systems and is used in accordance with the way that they had envisioned their goals being. So not going straight into production, but doing a little bit of a test or a pilot program. Next gets into the document preparation. So now we've done the actual testing and the piloting. Now we want to streamline the process, and we want to look at purging out, like we talked about, the 70% or whatever that percentage is of records that don't necessarily have to be scanned. A lot of times people think of the document preparation process as removing staples and clips and putting post-it notes on blank pages and making sure that the edges are good. But it also gets into understanding the documents as well to make sure that we're only scanning what we need to. And that is part of that document preparation and also planning process. Next is scanning and data capture. This is where the scanners a lot of times help us do the work. There's a variety of scanners and capture software out there, small scale, large scale, but you want to make sure that you're using the type of system in accordance with the project that you're trying to complete. This also gets into the DPIs and looking at the indexing fields. Do we want to do these projects on-site or off-site? A variety of factors that you want to consider in that scanning and data capture phase. Next is looking at the QA process. QA is extremely important. Again, I often say, we often say, you really have one chance to do a digitization project correctly, accurately, and successfully. For many reasons, other than it costs a lot of money and it's a very big time investment, but also there's a factor in that a lot of times people are making decisions on what they're going to do with their records when they're done with the project. So do you want to do a 90-day retention and destroy it after 90 days? You certainly could if you had a very good QA process to make sure that every single image was readable, oriented correctly, and useful through the scanning process. So we make sure that when we do projects, for example, we use great scanning software. We use great scanning equipment. We use resources that will actually look at each document as they're being scanned. And in certain instances, we may look at just about every image as it runs through the scanning process. Next is digital document upload. So even in the testing phase, like I said before, we want to make sure that they load correctly, that you have the right metadata, and it's useful in that electronic image repository of choice. Next gets into the refiling, the archival storage, and disposition. So as I said before, in the planning phase, you want to know, what are we going to do with these records when we're done scanning them? Are we going to keep them, or are we going to actually destroy them upon successfully imaging these after 90 days? Are we going to store them if they're a lifetime record internally or externally? Ultimately, with this scanning process, and we'll see this later, it really gives you instant access to information. So even though a record might be a lifetime record, scanning and digitizing is still a critical part of what a business function should be. Lastly is looking at our day forward scanning process. So it's always exciting when the scanning gets done and everything is electronically accessible in software or whatever system you choose, but also thinking ahead of the project, ahead of the process. What are we going to do day forward? Are we going to have a centralized mailroom internally? Are we going to use our multifunction devices to do some scanning? Are we going to use a third-party vendor as a mailroom to actually do the digitizing? And how does that filter in, especially if you're keeping a physical file? So we have clients that want to keep their physical file because they have to. It's a wet signature. It's records that they feel more comfortable with. So how does it go back into that folder if you're still creating paper, but you want to digitize it before it ends up in that folder? So really meticulously looking at what is that process going forward for digitizing and making sure that things are transparent. So as I referenced before, digitizing is a great solution for accessing information, but it also is extremely important to look at, what systems are we going to be using for digital access. Metadata tags, they play a critical role in the success of any software solution, and using the right structure within the software can allow you to quickly scan and find the documents, or even find information within the documents. So what you want to start thinking about in this part of the process is who will be using the system. How are they going to use the digital documents? What are other systems that the software might need to integrate with, core systems, for example? How else will the metadata be involved with the software? So these are all critical things to think about, because again, looking back to when we were talking about the strategic planning and even the digitization process, everything has to flow into the system accordingly. And a lot of times it isn't necessarily going to be the same system for everybody. It certainly could be, but different businesses have different requirements. In the world of TAB, we work with archives and records management. They have certain types of requirements, but then moving upstream, where we found a lot of success, is working with the actual business line. And they have very different requirements around metadata and tagging and searching and workflows versus the back-end process of archiving. So metadata offers really a powerful way to search and query to find the critical documents quickly, including the ability to retrieve all documents related to a particular group of records. So querying down, drilling down, finding what you want more quickly. Then you look at document classification. It's really a foundational aspect, and can be a core piece of information, both from an organizational perspective, but also from a file or a document perspective as well. What metadata also allows you to do is create permissions management that also dictate, who can access what information, granting the access based on the role. Maybe more granular if something is flagged or it's high sensitivity, but that's where metadata is also important. Audit trails. Audit trails is important because you want to make sure that from a data integrity perspective is it's authentic, and something hasn't been taken out and modified and brought back in and now looked at as the original record. So we want to make sure that we can manage that chain of custody, or that process where users are potentially manipulating data, or they're manipulating the actual document. Of course, if they have the permissions to, based on that time-stamped of that user, or whatever it may be within the application that you're using for the audit trail. Retention and disposition, we talked about this before, and for decades we've been talking about how to minimize physical records. We've been talking about trying to create the 10-year plan of not having records offsite. But the same thing is important with regard to digital records as well. We often heard that space is certainly cheap, but you want to be able to apply the right information so you can manage the long-term preservation, potentially legal hold or retention hold elements for that record and those documents. When the right metadata is implemented, this can also be used to generate great reports and insights into the data within the solution. There's systems where you can drill down into reporting, using data for dashboarding, for workflow processes, for productivity, a variety of things that will, again, help the organization to run their business more effectively. Then looking at maintaining the document integrity through the versioning and the tracking, as we referenced before, but literally doing it with the software, not just the audit trails, but also creating a process where if a document is downloaded outside the system and brought back in, it creates a secondary version, or it creates a third version, which allows you to go back to the original version to have that authenticity and the integrity of the original document itself. And of course, having the ability to ensure the completeness of a file. So using the examples again of HR files, we can automatically create documents that should be received based on something that's being done annually for an employee. If it's a certification, if it's benefits, looking at loan operations, if a new loan is created, and we want to identify if they have all the key collateral documents, we can automatically create that metadata in systems and then allow a user to say, is it received? Is it not received? Is it an exception? Are we waiting for something from somebody? And then creating a workflow to ensure that we have that complete file when you're onboarding a new type of record. So with this, again, it brings back the opportunities to create better reporting and better insights into your information and dashboarding to make sure that as an organization, you're compliant, if you will. So keeping your eye on the outcome of a project during the entire efforts of strategic planning, digitization, day forward planning, these things all bring success to both the short-term and the long-term efforts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you an example of some of the digital access and technology and the things that you can look for in managing your digital or physical collections.
Thank you, John, and great to be here in presenting our application Tab Fusion. So the Fusion application is browser-based, so it's great to access from any sort of PC or laptop computer, along with mobile devices and tablets. But let's take a look at this system, designed for managing electronic records. Here, I'm logging in as an administrator, so I'll have full access to the system, but Fusion is permissions-based, and you can lock down based on different departments so they can access and manage those individual collections and those specific records. With Fusion, we create a great data structure with our electronic attachments. We can view that structure here on the left-hand side of our screen, where we can click and instantly gain access to those data sets. And those, in this case, it's a set of clients that we're managing. So clients have individual metadata columns, which can be queried and searched upon that represent that individual. And then you can drill down from there to view things such as file metadata, if you're tracking the physical record, but then we can get involved with the digitization and the electronic attachments. So we go from the file down to the document level, where we can start clicking and viewing the individual records and the electronic attachments here. Fusion does a great job of quickly bringing in this information, whether it's from a bulk import, drag and drop, or just going in and adding an individual document, working from home or whatever the use case is. The data in the grid is also completely searchable. So typically, customers either use this query feature, so I can, again, drill down based on the classification, the document type, or I can leverage some saved queries here to view a certain document collection, such as administrative documents, or I can click here and view policies that I'm managing. And then, here you can see the paperclip represents an electronic attachment that I can click on, or down below, the plus sign represents just a line of metadata that's a workflow to start the digitization process. With each record in Fusion, we do have, there's a complete chain of custody and audit trail. So as soon as that data is brought in or that record's added, we're going to start managing that. And it relates back to that user credential that I logged in with at the beginning. So here I can click this menu button. The same menu I used to get to the documents, I can view the audit, retention information, or the complete physical tracking history of where that when that record actually became digital. So here I'll click on the audit, and you can see when this record was created, any sort of changes to the not only the metadata, but the actual electronic attachment. So going back to our list of clients. We can go from the client down to the file, using that structure again, down to the document level, where we can view and manage the electronic information. Fusion is also applying retention to each record. So the retention can also have reports applied to it. So the data and information is exposed for retention is through the menu button as well. So you can see if the policy that's been applied to the electronic, and then where it's been and what the when it needs to fulfill its life cycle there. Fusion will also generate reports correlated to the retention, and you can manage the retention policies as well in our system. And the reports can also be leveraged based on any of the metadata within the electronic attachment or in the viewer here. So on the bottom, we have a list of reports that are completely customizable and built out. But if I just click on what's eligible in the system, it's going to scan my current records and find out when and allow me to submit for disposition or create a new purge process for the electronic attachments. That retention policy in that area and those reports are managed here in this part of our application called the retention code maintenance, where I define what retention is, what's triggering the retention, and then how long I want to keep it around for. And that's, again, very powerful tool, very scalable tool for the department, for each individual department, or based on your document classification. Fusion is a really great tool to do that. So with that said, John, was there anything else you'd like me to kind of show or touch on, or should we continue?
The only other two things I'm going to have you, Robbie, is do the global searching and both the in and outside of attachments, just to show the value of knowing the data within the information. The technology should really work for the users to find what they're looking for quickly. So.
Right. So I'll pull up a grid of documents here. You can kind of see I've got a subset of about 350 results. But Fusion also is OCRing the electronic attachments. So I can go up here to the top left-hand corner and type in any sort of keyword, such as Fusion, and it's not only going to scan the metadata in the grid for the word Fusion, like it's highlighted, but it's also going to locate it in the attachment itself. So it'll actually load the viewer, load the attachment, and then highlight the keyword, so you can kind of scroll through and identify where that word is. So we get a really nice way to search and find those key data points within the digitized attachment. Typically our customers are querying, they're locating the document with this part of the application, but the OCR and those functionalities are a really great tool to leverage when something really critical comes up and you need to find it.
Very good. Thanks, Robbie. As we transition to one of the slides that we have at the end here on the tab resources slide, one of the areas, as I talked about before, is some organizations are in this hybrid mode, and some organizations have physical files that they might want to digitize, but they also might want to keep in physical format as well, or keep key documents, key collateral in the mortgage world, or energy, biopharma, whatever it may be. And with the Fusion software, you can still manage those physical records and unify both the digital and the physical together, using the same retention information, potentially using the same metadata, so that you're reducing the dependency on those physical records, but you're also leveraging the same software tool to know where all your information is, physical, electronic, whatever it may be. So before we tail off today, I did want to thank everybody for joining us and taking the time to learn more about what we found to be a very solid and successful process for going digital. I mean, the timing is great for a lot of organizations. Making sure it's done the right way the first time is extremely important. What we put together here is some different resources from our website that you can certainly go to and search on. And it really revolves around both the technology side and setting it up, looking at how to supercharge your metadata in certain technologies, replacing legacy technology out there, and then finding a best practice template for digitizing and bringing things into a more electronic world. So I'd like to thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.